Joining us now is Stephen Hayes of the Corporate Council on Africa, here to talk to us about U.S. trade and the upcoming G20 summit in the United States. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Vincent.
Now, the Corporate Council on Africa is hosting a U.S.-Africa Business Summit on the 29th of September. Tell us a little bit about the summit, who's attending, and the objective.
Well, the objective, first of all, is to increase U.S.-Africa trade. I think it's this country's best opportunity it's going to have in the next 2 years to really get the United States much more committed to and much more invested in Africa, and I should say the U.S. private sector. The Corporate Council is a group of about 180 companies. They represent collectively 85% of all U.S. investment in Africa. So the meeting's important. We expect a number of heads of state coming, about 10 or so right now. But, and I'd say just as importantly, we expect about 1,500 people, of which about 80% will be business persons from Africa and United States.
Now, you have had these interactions and discussions in the past. We know that currently in the sub-Saharan Africa, total global share, or rather share in the global market is less than 2%.
Well, it's less than 2%.
2%.
Probably
and this
closer
is a
to
drop.
1%.
Yeah, dropped from about 6% sometime in the 80s. What went wrong? What ought to be done?
I think a number of things went wrong. I think that in comparison, the rest of the world took off in part. I think that the lack of infrastructure in Africa, I think the lack of strong governance systems put Africa behind. I think that the potential is there, but I think that Africa actually did fall behind over the last 20, 25 years.
How do you make sure that you don't just invite these heads of states and good officials who come here, participate in this talk shop, and go back home and nothing changes, and down the line, 5 years, we're talking about the same situation in Africa?
Well, in reality, I don't have a lot of hope that there's going to be significant changes in the attitudes of leadership necessarily. Where we can make a difference is building the partnerships between African businesses, and there is a vibrant business sector that's beginning to grow, especially, of course, in the countries of Nigeria, South Africa, other countries of Southern Africa. A lot of good things are happening. But U.S. investors are not going to go into Africa unless they know their partners. And so we provide that vehicle which people can meet, begin to develop the base, and also address issues that we can affect in the United States. And I think there's a lot of issues in the U.S. that prevent investment as well.
Now, the G20 summit is coming up on the 24th and 25th of this month at Pittsburgh in the U.S. Right. What is it you want to hear the officials there, the ministers there discuss specifically about Africa?
In terms of Africa, the G20 is an interesting institution in that it represents about 2/3 of the world's population. It brings in developing countries, but I think only one African developing country is in there, and that's South Africa, which is, of course, one of the more advanced economies. The problem with the G20 and that setup is that a lot of other countries are left out. South Africa cannot be the only country that speaks for Africa. And I don't think that it wants to be. But what I would like to see is stronger commitment from the G20 towards financing mechanisms in Africa, not just simply addressing the financial crises, which this meeting is going to be focusing on, but setting up greater mechanisms for trade, and encouraging investment as well.
Yes. Now, we know that to a large extent African economies are agro-based. How do you ensure that investors from the U.S. and other developed countries help this continent to maximize on the real value of its produce?
Well, this is interesting because one-fourth of our summit is going to be addressing the agribusiness issues, and largely because every country in Africa does produce agriculture. Every country can be a food producer, not only for its own country, but for international trade. It's where Africa, I think, has the greatest to offer in the short run. And yet we prevent a lot of that produce from getting to the United States because of our own tariffs, and I think we've got to address those issues. I also think that U.S. agribusiness has to look to Africa as a greater point of investment.
Yes. Thank you very much, Stephen Hayes of the Corporate Council for Africa. Thanks for coming to be on In Focus today.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.